Welcome to The Awakener, ladies and gentlemen. This is The Awakener. It's a pleasure to have you here. We got a huge show to talk about all kinds of stuff today. It's going to be exciting for the latest and greatest from like Israel, Taiwan to the Hunter Biden fiasco. It's going to be pretty amazing. So before we begin, I just want to direct you to theawakener.ca. That's my website. On this website, you can see kind of my theories as to what is happening. What is happening is very complicated. I can't summarize it to you in a couple sentences. You're just going to have to go on the website, kind of explore, understand history, and then you'll kind of understand what's happening today. It's an amazing time to be alive and the things that we're going to witness in the near future because it's going to be crazy what happens. It's any day now. So before we begin, I just want to welcome the Insider. The Insider's on another show. Welcome, Insider.
Thanks, Awakener. Appreciate being on.
So let's start right away. We got so much to talk about. So the first thing we're going to talk about is Pandora's box. What is Pandora's box, Insider?
Why don't you better explain that for everybody?
Okay, so the Pandora's box is a Hunter Biden case. So the Hunter Biden case, as we've talked about for many years, is the grand awakening to this ultimate kind of reveal that's going to change the entire complexity of the world. So that reveal is that a general group of politicians or elite establishment politicians in this world who control or work for the Western world, which is Canada, the USA, Australia, Europe, are being covertly blackmailed and extorted by foreign powers. Now, the talk is that Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent, which, that's not necessarily the case at all. Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, used to be an Israeli spy, but he was co-opted by the KGB. And you can do any kind of research that shows that the FBI was doing heavy investigations into him, believing that he was working for the Soviets. To understand what is happening is that these group of politicians are basically the Soviet Union's last stand for defeating the Western world. AKA, they're being blackmailed and extorted to pass an agenda and to do things to us to basically destroy the Western world and to lead us into being conquered. That is, by a covert Soviet Union that could not defeat the United States in war, and the Iron Curtain collapse is nothing but a giant fraud that is orchestrated by the KGB. And it is very, very complicated what is going on. These two sides that you're witnessing, a military-industrial complex of the USA and the Soviet Union, are engulfed in this kind of covert battle, and nobody's telling anybody. So once again, how does this relate to the Hunter Biden scandal? Well, it relates because Hunter Biden, once he is kind of indicted of being a Chinese spy, as we've theorized on the show, it's going to basically open the Pandora's box to this great awakening in the Western world, which is our politicians are basically covert enemies. And boom, once Hunter Biden becomes a Chinese, what happens to Joe Biden? What then happens to Trudeau? What happens to all these other investigations? And the world will change. So specifically, I guess, Insider, what's Pandora's box again? It's the greatest awakening. You're supposed to, and you know the answer to this.
There you go. It's the greatest awakening.
It's the greatest awakening. So, it's very difficult to kind of explain to you without kind of going on to the Awakener.ca and studying all that material. What is the latest with the Hunter Biden case, Insider?
So the latest thing is that he was called to be a witness with Congress, and they were debating whether it's going to be a closed door session or in front of the cameras. In front of the cameras is absolute garbage because they only get 5 minutes to ask questions. Nothing private is going to be discussed. Whereas a closed door session like they did with Donald Trump Jr., etc., is very detailed and can take hours, where they can really extract true testimony from Hunter Biden. So he basically gave the middle finger to Congress, and instead he went in front of the Senate building and he went and did his little media, presser, and whined and complained about this is an attack against his father and MAGA Republicans and this and that. And basically now he's in contempt of Congress, and we're going to see if they're going to properly go after him.
Right. So if you followed his case really started kind of as a little bit of, he just owed a little bit of tax money. He had a gun charge against him. Right. And we talked about on the show, actually, we predicted the whole Hunter Biden scandal 4 years ago, believe it or not. When nobody was really onto him, nobody knew what was going on. And the reason he bought a gun is actually he went to try to kill himself, commit suicide, and his girlfriend at the time intervened and called the Secret Service. So this gun charge is only the tip of the iceberg as to what is really happening. So now his case, it appears, Insider, has gotten a lot more complicated. So it's now gone from this small little tax fraud, which he was given a plea deal or a way out. And then he was, you've advanced. So now he's indicted on multiple charges of tax fraud. This is going to lead to, where did he get his money from?
Right.
Oh, nice. Why were foreign governments giving him all this money?
Right.
We're selling out secrets and stuff. You can never see Trump talking about, well, if I did what Joe Biden did, I'd be guilty of treason. So to go back and reverse and go all the way back is that the Bidens and Hillary were both involved in this scheme with Barack Obama to sell out the U.S. secrets before this giant war that was going to be orchestrated by the world's global elite, specifically Zelensky and crew. This is where it gets very, very complicated. So to understand what was happening is that basically the good guys were spying on the bad guys were spying on the good guys, and all the stuff you see about Donald Trump being spied on, you know about already. All the stuff you know about the Bidens and Barack Obama being spied on, you don't know about yet, because it all relates to Patrick Ho's case. You can Google this: Patrick Ho, Devin Archer, Hunter Biden, Joe Biden, and then boom. So this is really only going to get worse for Hunter Biden. This is going to lead down a huge can of worms, which we've been predicting on the show for quite some time. And this is really just the beginning. Now, Insider, we had talked before about Hunter Biden getting a deal. Is that true?
Yes, we did. We talked about it.
So we talked about this, Insider, because we theorized that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and Hillary and crew have already jumped off kind of the ship hundreds of miles back, which means it looks like they're optically working for the enemy, but they've already tried to sign deals to kind of get out, I guess, of huge criminal charges, which would lead to, maybe life imprisonment
or the death
or
penalty.
Death.
Yeah,
right. And this is going to have to do this. I guess that they're going to have to betray their communist conspiracy that they were helping enable before, which we've theorized in this podcast. So the whole case of Hunter Biden coming out is that you can see that it's taking a very long time.
Yep.
You can see that Joe Biden and crew seem to be like they're on top of this, which means that they're trying to suppress it. You agree with me, right, Insider? It appears like they're trying to suppress it.
Oh, they're obviously the DOJ is suppressing it, and they're stretching this out. Like it's going to culminate right before the 2024 election.
Right. And this is what the beauty of what is happening is, because if you're working for the enemy, you think that Joe Biden works for you. You're sitting in the president's chair, or Joe Biden's sitting in the president's chair, and you think Joe Biden works for me.
Right.
So if you understand that, you understand everything the communist conspiracy has done is to basically set up everything that Donald Trump kind of messed up, which we talked about. Iran is putting up an EMP weapon. We talked about North Korea putting up an EMP weapon. We talked about all the, what North Korea was doing in regards to pulling their own, plutonium, the uranium. This is what is happening is so complicated. So once again, go to the website. Let's talk about how this all relates to Israel, Palestine. What's the latest on Israel?
So Israel did that ceasefire. There was exchange of hostages, and then Hamas broke the ceasefire, and the war is back on. Seems like Israel has cornered Hamas. They're even planning to flood the tunnels, but they know that there's hostages in there, so that's what's holding them back. Otherwise, they'd flood Hamas like rats in their own tunnels. And then they're also having to deal with attacks from Hezbollah in the north with the Lebanese border.
Right. The latest is that I think that Israel army found a bunch of tunnels that were leading, I guess, from Gaza. And some of them were so big you could actually drive vehicles through. Did you see that?
Correct.
So in these kind of situations, tunnel network like this would be not very good for war, right? Being able to sneak into enemy soldiers during a war is probably not really good for Israel's national security. You would agree, right?
Of course. Well, they're using these tunnels where they have cities underneath houses and hospitals and buildings in Gaza, and tunnels that run all the way into Egypt and into Israel.
Right. So now we're witnessing kind of like what I would say is, Israel and the Western world kind of know, or they got wind of this epic invasion is going to happen. That is what Barack Obama was setting up. So once again, to go back with Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Barack Obama is setting up what I would call a power structure changing war, which means the elitists, the communist conspiracy, were setting up basically a war where the Western world and the Eastern world, the communists, would kind of meet on a three-tier front. So number one, we have Ukraine, which everyone's forgot about Zelensky, which we'll talk about later, right, Insider?
Yep, exactly.
Everyone's
that is the
completely
number
forgot
one.
about this guy. Completely forgotten. And now we have the two, which is Israel set up, and then the third is going to be Taiwan. So we've theorized that maybe like what has happened is that, you know, Hamas has kind of done like an invasion or a test run to see how an epic invasion of Israel would go by land, sea, and air, obviously on a very miniature scale. And what Mossad has done, or Israel has done, is that they're kind of trying to unite all Israel together of this. They maybe knew about the invasion coming. Now they're trying to take out the tunnel network, and they're all preparing for kind of what I would say is the next kind of front or the next battle that's going to happen, because this was only a test run. In Taiwan, it's very much the same thing. What's the latest in Taiwan?
You know what? I'm not I don't have the latest on what's happening in Taiwan. You tell me.
So I guess the last 2 weeks I was hearing that the Chinese were flying as many as 60 planes a day, military planes over Taiwan or in Taiwanese airspace.
Mm-hmm.
So we almost have like a third covert front that's being set up right now, where it looks like the Chinese are kind of surveilling, well, how are we going to take Taiwan? And then how are we going to maybe get toward expanding past Taiwan into other nations? What's really funny, I don't know how to say this. The opposition party in Taiwan was even visiting China as well, which is really, really strange to kind of make sense of. I guess what you can kind of relate to is that kind of all the opposition, like you have the mainstream conservative party, the Democrats and crew, or the left-wing parties in all these nations, they're all secretly in bed with Russia and China. And it's becoming more and more obvious that way. So to recap once again, is we have this huge front in Taiwan, we have this huge front that's happening in Israel, and we have another front that's happening in Europe. All the same time, well, you know, the elitists start saying, "Hey, America, come on to war, come to us." And it's really an interesting time, because if you understand the whole fiasco, you understand Biden, you understand Hillary, you understand Obama, is that basically the enemy was getting prepped to win this war, I would say 10 years ahead of time. And this is something that the Insider and me have talked about for quite some time on this podcast.
Yeah, and if you've been following what we've been talking about, so everybody sees the axis of evil, right? You have Russia, China, Iran. So Iran is there behind Hamas and Hezbollah. You have originally Russia going against Ukraine in really, I think it was more of a play than anything with Zelensky. And so second was Israel. The third one that's going to be coming up is definitely going to be Taiwan. And like you said, they're trying to goad the American military into an action so that they could, launch a war.
Right. And this is all what's happening, is right. This is the evolution we've talked about of the communist conspiracy, how, I've tried to educate people on how this has happened. So the elitists set up World War I, right? The criminal conspiracy set up World War I.
Right.
What happened? The creation of the Soviet Union, the Russian Revolution, and then the communists kind of seized control and power, and then you had the Soviet Union in 1922. And then we had World War II. So the elitists set up World War II.
Right.
What happened after World War II? The communists had half the earth. And this is like kind of like their next stage in their evolution, which is World War III and the creation of global communist conspiracy, global control, which is what the Soviet Union, this communist conspiracy, has fantasized for quite some time. Now, the enemy has been prepped about all this ahead of time, but the Western industrial complex also knows what's going on. So this is like a tug of war battle what's going on. And you can really see like the waves in the matrix are starting not to make sense anymore, right, Insider? Everything seems to be kind of
totally. Yeah, no, go ahead. I agree. It's starting, people are starting to wake up and realize that something just doesn't add up. Even if they were living in a shell before and they just believed whatever they saw in the mainstream media, they're now starting to realize that things are just not adding up and they don't understand why.
Right. And the reason things don't add up is because, you're sitting on a boat, all the waves that are rocking are the matrix not making any sense. And you're understanding, well, what's causing all these waves? What's causing all these waves is that these two industrial complexes are basically at war with each other. and nobody's telling you really what's going on. So this is very much a pull or a tug of war that's happening beneath the waves, and all these waves that are being created are kind of setting off, oh, this doesn't make sense. Now, the waves that we've kind of speculated that are coming up are going to be absolutely massive. Do you want to discuss some of those with our guests?
Well, I think the first thing would be China attacking Taiwan. And again, trying to goad America into protecting Taiwan, getting them into a war. And then you're going to
Right.
have, the axis of evil all coming out after America.
Right. And then you have Joe Biden, going back to Joe Biden's case, because everything is related, right? You have
Right.
A, B, and C, everything's related. And then you have Joe Biden's case. Well, Joe Biden's polling numbers are what, 30% right now? He's failing. He is clearly going to lose the next election to Donald Trump if Donald Trump is eligible to run again. And even the general public is seeing that now. So what happens if Joe Biden gets 120 million votes in the next election? Well, you laugh.
No one will doubt the cheating that transpired if that's the case. If Joe Biden wins the next election with the poll numbers being the way they are, so abysmal for him, his dissatisfaction polling is so high. Everyone's really upset. Bidenomics has been an absolute failure. Inflation is killing people. It's the economy's stupid again.
Right.
It's always that. So if Joe Biden wins the next election, as you've said, if you just predicted it could happen, people are definitely going to wonder how the hell did all these people, unless they're all the migrants, who voted for Joe Biden?
Right. It just doesn't make sense. And this is what is happening. The Hunter Biden case is happening so slowly right now that the communists are getting themselves into a pickle jar for the next election, where they're having only a certain amount of options of what they can do. And we've discussed those options, quite in detail on the website. So let's go over those 4 options one more time for the guests, okay? Because we're kind of putting all the pieces together for you. So the communist conspiracy, I want you to think about it this way. So Barack Obama was setting up a smash and grab job for the communist conspiracy to win, I guess, this next war. So the elitists set up the war. There's the 3 fronts getting set up. And then, Russia and China were given a whole plethora of means to defeat the Western world in this war. So Trump comes along, cancels all these. And then you had coronavirus comes out. They get Joe Biden in. Now, because of Joe Biden's son, and what is happening is that Joe Biden's time in office is now on a ticking clock. It has been a ticking clock since his first day. And you're really seeing the communist conspiracy knows that he's not polling well, but they know they don't want Trump to get back on the nuclear button. Right. Think about things optically, right? China is not going to go for Taiwan. They're not going to go for Israel and Saudi Arabia. And they're not going to go for the rest of Europe, Poland, Hungary, and Czechoslovakia, with Trump on the nuclear button.
Right.
You understand that, right,
yeah,
Insider?
He'll block them. Absolutely.
Of course. So the whole point is to basically have Joe Biden on the nuclear button, who they think is working for them. And you can really see this communist conspiracy. They have 4 options. One is they have to openly cheat the next election and reveal their hand and say, okay, well, we control part of America's elections. Let's open the Pandora's box there. Let's let people understand that the elections are fake. And then they can dive into why and figure out the answers. Number 1. So number 2, they can kill President Trump. What would you think happened if they killed President Trump?
I think that'd be too obvious.
I think that'd be way too obvious. So number 1, they risk America kind of going completely right wing, too fast, seizing control of the government, and then they can never basically do this world war with having grand repercussions happen in a war. So they don't want to do that. They want to do something as sly as possible and not wake anybody up. Can you think of another option?
Well, they almost did do something sly. I don't know if people are familiar that a black lady was caught in Atlanta pouring gasoline on the home of Martin Luther King. And she was arrested. Luckily, people in the area saw her and videotaped her. Videotaped her, showing my age. Filmed her with their phones, and then 2 off-duty New York police officers that just happened to be in Atlanta grabbed her, stopped her until Atlanta police arrested her. But the whole concept was then to create a race war where people would think, oh, some MAGA Republican was burning the house, the historical house of Martin Luther King Jr. So they are planning. There are plans in place to cause that race war that could potentially happen in the United States.
Well, we talked about a war. So the number three option they have is they can just do the war. So they can go for
Yeah.
Taiwan, they can go for Israel, they can go for the rest of Europe. They can just do it by massive force, and they can try to keep Joe Biden in the White House under the guise of a national emergency. They can stir up civil unrest like crazy and before the next election. We can't have an election because there's too much craziness, there's too much war. Things need to be settled out, right? So that's option number three. So we went over them: cheat, kill President Trump, war or mass confusion. And the last one is they can accept their defeat, which is they can just let President Trump win the next election, and they can risk having another 4 years happen where the communist conspiracy then gets backtracked. Do you understand?
Yeah,
So what it means by backtracked is the Western world rejects communism and even more because President Trump turns back the energy independence. He turns back all whatever the Biden was doing. And also we have economic prosperity again. Wokeness, communism is basically ruled out. And this is not something that I think that they want to do.
No.
So this is like, it's really a game of tug of war. It's nothing more than a battle for control of this planet. And, everyone has forgotten Zelensky by now. It's not even in the news anymore after it was the biggest thing.
He couldn't even get any money from the Congress.
No, and it's just amazing, right? Because the average person is thinking to themselves, well, wait, why is nobody talking about Zelensky anymore? Nobody cares anymore. And it's like, these are the kind of the ripples that are happening where people are like, hey, this doesn't make sense anymore. This doesn't and it's, what's going to happen to Ukraine is that we predicted Ukraine was going to lose this war eventually. The money's going to dry up. They're not going to send any more money to them. They're not going to win this war. Ukraine is going to be basically taken over by Russia, is what we predicted. And then the war is going to be on for the rest of Europe. So it's going to be on for Poland, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and the rest, which would basically mean a world war. So the communists are running out of options here. Their general evolution of World War I, Soviet Union, World War II, half the earth, and then World War III, it's not working out for them. So Barack Obama's smash and grab job is not turning out so good, is it?
No, it's not. And we're lucky for that.
We are lucky for that. So I know nobody cares about Canada, really, but here in Canada, this horrible communist country we live in, that's an enemy of the United States, we should probably talk about it because, some of our listeners are Canadian. And it's important to talk about, your friend that actually is your enemy.
This country is.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about our friend that is our enemy, which is Canada. What's the latest on Trudeau's polling?
So Trudeau's in the same situation that Biden is in. His poll numbers are horrible. Now, instead of being attacked like he was in Vancouver last week, instead of being attacked by conservatives that hate his guts and want him out of office. And by the way, there's a petition going around sponsored in the House of Commons that Trudeau should step down and call an election as soon as possible. But back to Vancouver, he was in Vancouver and they had to call the police in because he was being attacked by pro-Palestinian protesters that were calling for a ceasefire again now that the war's back on. So he's getting lambasted on both sides. He's getting his core voter bloc would be the pro-Hamas Palestinian people, not the conservatives. Conservatives hate him, and now the pro-Palestinians hate him. His poll numbers are as bad as and as low as Joe Biden's, and people are wondering how he could even survive. But he has declared that he has not finished his business yet as leader of Canada, and that he will stay on till the next election as leader of the Liberal Party.
Which we predicted on this podcast.
Yeah, you were the one who said it. You said it yourself that he's not stepping down anytime soon because he's the puppet that needs to be in place.
He's the puppet that needs to be in place. The reason why the global people or the elitists all spent money to get Harper out of there was because the communists want to advance, and they want to take out the West and advance on the Western world and destroy the Western world without really much kind of knowledge about what is going on. So the whole key to that in a war is procuring the United States uranium. So we kind of put two and two together at this place. Well, you can't ship U.S. uranium outside of the United States onto Russia. It's not allowed. The FBI and military have it completely locked down. But you can ship it to Canada. Right. You can process it in Canada, the Cameo plant, and then you can ship it overseas. And this is why they all invested a ton of money to get Harper out of office in the last election, because they were hoping from 2015 onward in Canada that they would have basically an open flow of US uranium being processed and sending over to the enemies, all prepping with their nuclear technology against us before this war. Now, they're hoping to get Trudeau like reelected because he was put in office because he's the control plant being blackmailed and extorted to basically do this agenda to not turn the taps off. And the communist conspiracy is hoping that, you know, maybe all this has failed for a bit, but maybe we still have time. Maybe something will happen where we can take a better turn, or something will happen where we'll have more positive outcome, and we'll get back to, you know, being popular again, and we'll be able to keep Trudeau and we can turn on the taps again. But none of this is happening. They're being led on a giant game of defeat, this laser pointer. Like the communists are waiting, not exposing themselves and how their conspiracy operates and how they gain footage, hoping that everything is going to turn around when it's not going to turn around at all. And this is like, this is like the biggest novel ever written. And I feel like every day we read one page of this novel, and it
moves further and closer to what you'd predicted even a few years ago.
Well, yeah, a few years ago, I predicted that the whole purpose of what is happening again is control and power. The evolution of the communist conspiracy to raise world government and world control, to subvert the West elections so that they have control of everything. And they obviously face, if you know world history, an industrial complex, the military industrial complex that has kind of believed that they have the ability to defeat the communist conspiracy. So we are engaged in a complete de facto war where nobody really knows. Everyone's going out to have dinner, spending time with their families, doing this and that, and they don't know what's going on. Anyways, Merry Christmas to each and every one of you. We're going to continue this in the Patreon because we've got more to talk about. Let's head there. Each and every one of you, welcome to